Hey everybody, welcome to Meet the Mailers. I'm Paul Bopnak for Who's Mailing What, and today I'm talking with Erik Koenig, President and Chief Strategist of SeQuel Response, and Chris Hofmann, VP of Digital Services for SeQuel Response. Before we get started, keep in mind that you can join our conversation at any time by commenting in the box below. Show your support by tapping the like button, and to get notified of when we add new videos, click on the subscribe button. Now let's meet today's guests. Welcome, Erik and Chris. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. Let's start by talking about both your backgrounds and SeQuel Response. How did you get started in direct mail?
Sure, I'll maybe start. So for me, getting into mail was kind of by accident. I was back in spring of 2008. I was about to graduate college, had absolutely no idea what I was going to do or what I wanted to do. And I had an aunt who had a professional mentor at the time named Jay Carroll, and she connected us to do an informational interview where I was going to just pick his brain, get to know his space, his role, the company, kind of get some insight from him as to how I should go about finding a role, and actually came out of that meeting with a job offer. So they created a biz dev role for me at the agency. This was pre-SeQuel, so this was at a former company we worked at. And so I had no mail experience at the time. I had no experience at all at the time. And I certainly had my reservations about the future of mail, as I think everyone has had every year that mail's ever existed. My parents had those reservations as well, but Jay was very passionate about really the direct response space, and that passion was infectious. And I really liked and was drawn to the fact that direct response has a scorecard. Everything's measurable. It's as much science as it is art. That was very exciting for me. So I spent the first 20 months or so of my career in a biz dev role, really trying to set meetings with companies that were already mailing, seeing if we could get an opportunity to test against existing controls. And that's really how I got into mail. Now I got involved with SeQuel, kind of stemming from that, because the agency at the time was building on top of a print facility, and we were really trying to redefine our persona in the space, and shift clients' focus away from cost per piece towards cost per acquisition, really be more responsible for moving the needle. We were having some success, but it was really hard to detether from the legacy business that was print, that we were really somewhat tied to. And Jay and Tom, his partner in SeQuel, spun off in January of 2010, brought a handful of us with, and gave us the opportunity to really build SeQuel from the ground up, and kind of write our own story of what we wanted it to be. And in those early days, Paul, I remember one of our content marketing managers would get so excited every time you'd like one of our tweets or our LinkedIn posts, because it kind of meant in some small way that we'd arrived, that
Absolutely.
we were finally a legit agency. But yeah, for me, almost 15 years now, one industry, one boss, really been doing the same thing, just certainly a lot better we are at it these days than we were a decade and a half ago.
Okay, cool. And you, Chris?
Yeah, well, my story is in terms of getting into direct mail. I've spent over 20 years prior to SeQuel on the client side in medical technology space, health insurance, and also higher ed. And when I was in the health insurance space as a director of marketing, I was with a health plan that was doing a lot of Medicare and individual and family insurance marketing. And of course, workhorse channel in that space is direct mail.
Right.
So that's where I really cut my teeth in direct mail. And that's actually how I was ultimately introduced to SeQuel. We had been using, a few different agencies, printers and so forth. And one day I got an email from a guy named Erik Koenig, sorry, Erik, that was had an offer, to check how sort of list hygiene. It was an offer to run our list through hygiene to see if there was any waste. And, turns out I just, decided to respond to that email. Had my first introduction to SeQuel. One thing led to another. And I ended up moving all of our direct mail business over to these guys. They just had I just liked what I was hearing from them. We ran a couple of tests originally, just to make sure that they were, they could do what they said they could do. And ultimately moved all that direct mail volume over to SeQuel. So I had a great relationship with these guys. I moved on from the health plan into the higher ed space, working at the University of Wisconsin Extension as the director of marketing over there. And that was really a fully digital environment. It was all online degrees and working with non-traditional students. So we were doing, had a lot of spend in Google, Facebook, some in programmatic, but it was kind of still sort of early days, and built up kind of an internal agency there, in the digital agency there. Then around late 2015, got a call from Jay Carroll, who Erik mentioned earlier, and SeQuel had been, was 5 years in, was having a lot of success in direct mail, and said, hey, we want to get into digital. And we want somebody who understands the value of direct mail and can help us integrate direct mail and digital. And so it just sounded like a great opportunity, so I jumped on board.
Cool, awesome. And what type of services does the company offer to marketers?
Yeah, so we're at the highest level. We're a direct response marketing agency. So we focus a lot on growth-oriented brands, many of which are direct to consumer. We're trying to help them either launch or scale mail programs, and predominantly customer acquisition programs. So more tactically, from a service perspective, we manage mail campaigns soup to nuts. So from budgeting and strategy to test design, creative development, so the copy and design, the targeting, so prospect modeling, brokerage, what I call merge sciences, so data processing, merge purge, we do it all in-house, print production, letter shop, postal optimization, digital integration, and marketing analytics, and then rinse and repeat, right? So kind of front to back. We also, I should add, have digital standalone capabilities and digital only clients. So full suite of digital advertising services. We've got a full stack digital marketing team. So we've got expertise in pay-per-click, paid social, programmatic, web analytics, tag management, and the like. So very much can check all the boxes as it relates to DR from a direct mail and digital perspective. I'd say what maybe sets us apart, beyond just those services, which many companies provide, would be some of our methodologies and kind of our ethos around testing, data, and digital integration. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, roll it all up. We're trying to help find our clients' best prospects and convert them profitably into customers.
Right. Well, sounds great. Let's start by talking about the value proposition for direct mail. What's been driving interest in direct mail from marketers in recent years?
Yeah, Chris, maybe I'll start and I'll kind of hand it to you for your perspective. But I think from my view, the value prop for mail is relatively unchanged. Same as it's always been. It's a very effective and predictable channel. There's high ROI potential, there's high scale potential. But I do think that there's been a number of dynamics that have brought mail into more marketers' purview than there ever was. Ones who previously disregarded or ignored it. And that's certainly something we've experienced at SeQuel and really adapted our agency to support. So in the early days of SeQuel, we were, of course, working a lot with your tried and true, right? Your insurance and financial companies, those that had premiums and annuities and things like that, because that's who was heavily in mail. And about 80% of the time we were chasing companies that already had an existing mail program and trying to kind of elbow our way in for a test. We, however, in those early formative years had a number of have-nots, as we call them. So companies that were not in the mail channel, more in kind of a subscription setting where we launched them into the mailbox from scratch. And while those opportunities certainly have their own unique challenges, very different challenges, they proved to be some of our most rewarding experiences from a qualitative perspective, but some of our biggest case studies, quantitatively as well. So, in reacting to that, maybe at first not so consciously, but eventually consciously, we started migrating who we were chasing a little bit away from the haves and away from the tried and true insurance, financial, and more towards really any growth-oriented brand that had some kind of annuity or repurchase rate component to their business. So whether it's warranties or subscriptions, e-commerce, and that kind of became a focus of ours. And the nice thing there too, as insurance and financial mailers, you can't really provide offers, so it takes one of the legs of the stool away. Our impact is less, our performance is impacted by that. But when you get outside of insurance and financial, that's once again a pillar. And so that created more value for us, helped us be more successful. So we felt like we were onto something, and we got increasingly good at identifying which brands really should be mailing based on a variety of factors. And our prospect pool exploded, which really put us in a good position for the D2C boon of the last 5-6 years. In terms of brands popping up, pretty easy to do that 5 years ago through the advents of Facebook and the like, but also all of the funding and private capital investments in these companies. And so for a couple of years, we were probably a little too early to the dance on some of that. Convincing prospects to mail for the first time was a challenge. But eventually we got good at figuring out the key inflection points that someone might be good for mail and when would be the right time to entertain mail. And kind of gets to how mail has kind of entered more marketers' purview is in a lot of cases these digitally native brands, or at least the majority of them have been, they started to have some ceiling of growth coming, whether looming or already there from the Facebook and Google paid search and shopping and even influencer marketing. And so they were looking to diversify really out of necessity, right? So they're starting to look a little bit more upper funnel, mail, TV, radio, out of home. And in mail, they found and still do find a lot of similar benefits to what they liked about digital. From a targeting perspective, comparable if not better, from a analytics and tracking perspective, comparable if not better. And so they kind of fell into a channel and learned of the channel's basic core use case, about being a cost-effective way and a scalable way and a predictable way to acquire new customers. And that move to mail was happening already, more than a year ago. But Chris, maybe, as someone who experiences it on our digital-only side as well, I know some changes in the digital landscape are impacting that as well.
Yeah, clearly digital is going through, it always changes, but the changes that have been occurring over the last couple of years, and particularly in the last year, have been enormous. So, and you did see, as you kind of follow the trade publications in this space, like your Digiday or Ad Exchanger, you started seeing stories a few years ago about a lot of these direct-to-consumer brands starting to sour on Facebook advertising, starting to look to diversify their media mix as there was a lot of changes happening. There used to be third-party data that was integrated into Facebook, and as a result of the the 2016 kind of election stuff that had happened. Facebook pulled that data out, and that had an effect of weakening Facebook's lookalike models, because they now were missing important signals and sort of building out those models. And then of course, last year the hammer blow really came when Apple started enforcing their ATT privacy framework with the iOS 14.5 plus rollout, which of course is where you have to opt into tracking, not only on Facebook but on any app on the iPhone. And what that had to do is it really took the legs out of from underneath the core Facebook tracking mechanism, which of course is their pixel. And when you think about it, that pixel was on every website that mattered in the world, and it was tracking every transaction that happened on every website in the world. And of course, that's the thing you want to build a lookalike model off, is what are people buying. So that's had a huge impact on Facebook's ability to be this incredible prospecting channel. I like to say to people that Facebook had invented the greatest advertising mechanism that man has ever known and will ever know, because we're never going back to that. We're never going back to that with all the privacy stuff that's going on. And so, brands have learned that, and they're having to naturally diversify their mix. And it's not just Facebook, right? I mean, this affected every social app that's out there. It's not not that they can just turn to Snapchat or Twitter or whatever other social channel to have that prospecting return. And of course, the other issue is the third-party cookie blocking that's already occurring with Safari, with Firefox, and soon to be with Chrome. So, the foundations of digital marketing have been shaken and continue to shake. So we are in this, obviously in this sort of in-between period where people are trying to figure out what to do. And as brands start to look at other channels, start to look at traditional channels, there's really no other channel out there that can that has the precision and scale that direct mail has in terms of reaching prospects at the top of the funnel. So in short, all these changes in digital marketing, these foundational changes, are driving a lot of interest in the direct mail channel right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a real huge set of opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, testing is obviously an important discipline for direct marketers. What is essential for marketers to do or to know about testing?
Well, I think it is an important discipline. I'd argue probably the most important discipline. Certainly that's a mindset we have. And, when we think about testing here, especially in mail, we talk a lot about the direct marketer's dilemma, which I think it's probably our term, so I'll define it. The more we test, the better our odds of success, right? The more lists, offers, creatives, price points, channels, what have you. But also the greater the expense, the greater the risk, the longer it takes. So that creates this no free moves environment. We're always making trade-offs, right? And testing in direct mail is high stakes, right? It's not digital where we can have an A/B test in the morning, winter by noon, pause it if it's going sideways. Mail is something that is that when it's out there, you can't pull it back, right? It's paper, it's ink, it's posted. I mean, these are real costs and comparatively an expensive channel from that perspective. And so testing is not only an important discipline for direct marketers, specifically direct mail marketers, it's very important to be very intentional about how you're going to go about testing. So for us, when we started SeQuel, we wanted to have a methodology we could call upon. And we're big believers in taking as many trips to the plate as we can get, so really bang for the buck. We want to maximize our probability of success with testing a lot of lists, offers, creatives, and digital simultaneously. So in kind of a multivariate setting. But we want to be sensitive to investment. We're not calling on Geico and Capital One, right? So we need to be strategic in which of this broader test bed we're going to actually populate with mail volume. So for us, we populate a subset of the broader test bed we want results on, and we mail, let's say, maybe 8 cells out of a test bed of 36 potential combinations. And we mail those 8 cells, we read those 8 cells, and we use the results we see there to index and project the unpopulated combinations. And then ultimately what we get from that is a heat map of winners and losers. We're drilling a lot of holes, see where water bubbles up. And then we go back out in a subsequent campaign at a more significant level of volume to validate. And that's really been, again, we're not eliminating the direct marketer's dilemma. This is just what we believe to be the best way to game it. And it's very effective not only for beating control programs, but launching campaigns from scratch. But I think regardless of the methodology, I think the essential pieces for any direct marketer are to do it, right? Don't become complacent. You got to maintain a testing mindset. Have a roadmap of initiatives across all the variables, list off for creative digital. They should all have hypotheses and rationales, estimated impacts, and then be intentional. So do it with purpose, be consistent, allocate, based on the potential impact. You should have a mix of bunts, singles, doubles, triples, home runs, right? It shouldn't be all of one or all of the other. And again, just stick with it. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, no matter how you go about doing it, just do it and stick with it would be our counsel.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to prospecting campaigns, what would you say is the most important element for success?
Well, I think, good question. I think the most important element is probably the client understanding their metrics. And what I mean by that is understanding their AOVs or average order values or their lifetime values. And based on that understanding, knowing what CPA or cost per acquisition tolerance they have. For us, for companies that are launching mail, one of the constant conversations that I have is that I want to know what their tolerance is, not what they're achieving somewhere else. Because we're not trying to steal $1 from another channel. We're trying to justify another dollar be spent, right? And we steal some dollars too, right? And they do from us other channels at times, but it's about scale and growth and optimization. And again, a lot of the companies we work with being growth oriented, that's what they care mostly about. So I think that's very important. I think having a realistic timeline for achieving whatever that goal metric is, especially in a launch scenario, to be understanding of the rounds of testing it will take to get to that point. So I think that's the most important element. I would say the most important variable is data or targeting list audience. And there's the old adage, the 40-40-20 rule, right? 60 years or so old now, and 40% of success or failure in that formula from the data, 40% off or 20% creative presentation. We believe it still kind of holds, but we think there's 4 legs. Again, we think digital integrations kind of made its way into the equation. And also, even with the 4th variable in there, we think data is 70+% of success or failure these days. Mm-hmm. So one example, it's probably a silly and certainly an exaggerated one, but I like to think about an example where we give a decent offer with a pretty poor executed creative to a golfer for a dozen golf balls. It's got a shot of selling a dozen golf balls, right? But if we've got a buy one, get 10 dozen free golf ball offer, and it's the most beautiful creative you've ever seen, we spend buku bucks on it, and it goes to someone who doesn't golf, it's dead on arrival, right?
Right.
So again, it's an exaggerated example, but I think the point is sound, and that's why we test data more than anything else. We also, maybe not, I can't say this is unique, but part of our ethos at SeQuel is being data agnostic. So we don't have one strong partnership with this data company or two strong partnerships with these two data companies. We want to be truly agnostic, and we want to have models we test and vertical files and trigger files. We want to build models with several different companies, compilers, with the demographics and psychographics, cooperative databases, with that plus purchase behavior. We want to build multiple models per company. We even with one company in the same model type, we can build standard lookalikes, best customer models, LTV models, et cetera. You get out what you put in from a targeting perspective in this channel. And it all matters only if we let them compete in market. So we really want to let the prospect tell us what file is the best. And that indicates what we go back and order more of and how we iterate from there. But we do believe that variety is as important as the variable itself. That variety is what lets brands find success in the mail and scale to their greatest potential. We as the agency or your agency will need to do some negotiating on net name arrangements and things like that, so you can celebrate the uniqueness and not worry about the overlap. But that is all part of the sauce, that again, I think makes companies and programs really get to their greatest potential. And that, by the way, we've alluded to it, but with that as the anchor, the targeting records and the prospects we're going after, that of course is the audience that becomes the linchpin of our digital integration efforts too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that quite a few times, digital integration. What does that mean in today's marketing picture?
Yeah, well, I think Erik, he mentioned the metaphor of the three-legged stool and said that it was a fourth leg. So it's really bolstering that direct mail performance, that fourth leg. But importantly, it's another lever for testing, right? It's another lever we can bring to the table in terms of testing. And certainly, today with informed delivery, that's something that when we talk about digital integration, that's kind of a no-brainer. You absolutely want to do the informed delivery and execute on that. But we're taking it further, and the brand name of what our integration strategy is, we call it Surround. And what that's really all about is, it's about activating this data, these records that Erik's been talking about, these models that we've been building in a digital channel, and hitting as many people as we can, that we can match on those records with a digital impression, before they receive the mail and while that mail is in home. And so what's really important there, as a starting point foundationally is a really strong identity graph. So we can bring that data into an identity graph, into a demand side platform, and have confidence that the people we're serving impressions to are actually the people that are receiving mail. Because, the way we look at it in the context of an integrated campaign, anybody we serve an impression to that isn't receiving mail is a wasted impression. Because again, this is truly an integrated approach that we're trying to reach here. So another really important part of this is that timing piece, right? We know we have the advantage of knowing when that mail is going to get in home. So we know when to launch these campaigns with a level of precision. So we're starting to prime people with digital impressions before that mail comes in home, again, with the goal to assist the conversion on that long form tactile creative, otherwise known as the direct mail piece, right? A lot of times we'll talk about, I'll refer to the direct mail as kind of sending somebody a landing page, a tangible landing page. And that's really what the digital integration is trying to do. And what we do is we'll start with display, with a rich media HTML5 creative that's integrated with the direct mail piece. And then as a campaign matures, we will layer in additional channels. Can be web video, it can be native, it can be connected TV, OTT, it can even be now kind of an emerging channel is programmatic audio. So those are areas we can test and add to a campaign and measure the impact of those as well. And so what we've really seen in having this type of approach is that we have seen over several years we've tested digital direct mail versus direct mail only. We've seen lifts, consistent lifts of about 15, 18%. And actually, when you back that out to our match and reach rates, it's actually double that in terms of those lifts, because we can't match everybody in that digital space. Can't hit everybody with an impression. So there's a real consistent impact. So we definitely know that it helps. And we continue to test additional channels to further bolster the performance of the direct mail with the integration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How can marketers generally track performance of a multi-channel campaign and measure success?
Yeah, I'll join or maybe kick that off, and Chris, I'll loop you in on the digital side as well, because we look at it from a lot of angles. So as we all can appreciate, there's no silver bullet in attribution, right? And the more channels, the more nuanced that objective is. But there's certainly a best practice in our view for how to track and report on performance, and then therefore ultimately be able to define and measure success. For us, it's reporting on as much as we can. I mean, that's where we start. So at the most basic level, you've got all your directly attributable or last touch, last click activities and sales, right? So if there's custom TFNs or URLs, BREs, if there are BREs, QR codes, promo codes, how did you hear about us? All that stuff. We're gonna absolutely pay attention to that. However, we'd argue that's a worst case scenario, right? That's only capturing those individuals that followed what us, the marketers, wanted them to do, which is a fleeting few. Unless there's a really strong offer that's really truly requiring you to follow the path we as marketers want you to follow for a clean attribution sheet, right? There's not a whole lot of impetus. And so what happens, of course, is everyone's just Googling the brand name while watching Netflix, right? And you're going on the main page and you're calling the main number. And so to try to counteract that, we're running matchback analyses. So responses and sales, we're one of few, if not the only channel that has a known audience of PII that received the campaign that we can then match back to on a name, address, household type basis. And that, we're not naive to think that because someone received mail, they certainly bought because of mail, right? So it kind of is what I would say is the best case scenario. So we kind of start there and we draw the two poles, right? We've got our directly attributable worst case scenario, our matchback, which is kind of a best case scenario. And typically we see matchback being 2 to 3x what directly attributable indicates, again, based on a variety of factors. And so, of course, the natural follow-up is, well, where's reality, right? Reality is somewhere in between.
Yep.
And so there's a few things we look at on the mail side. Specifically, holdout testing is one way we can get at that, right? We can hold out specific subsets of the audiences we're mailing, perform the same matchback analyses, and that gives us a sense of what percent is incremental. It can't tell us who's incremental. That's the caveat with that, right? If we say 50% of matchback would have happened anyways, I can't tell you which half. So it's still good for business decisions. And then you can look at the matchback itself, and there's derivatives of that make it a little bit more palatable to us as marketers and our clients as they ferret out credit. It could be a fractional approach where certain promo codes from channels like paid search, specifically branded paid search that match to mailing, might get a bigger percent of credit than an organic non-branded search would get, because we clearly didn't make enough of an impression or an impact to have them search the actual brand. So we're probably stealing credit they're not responsible for. So we look at that. Time decay is another one, so you can take more credit for matches that are closer to in-home and then let it kind of trail out over time. But then we look at a million things online too. And Chris, maybe you're best to chip in on that part of all of what we report on from a digital activity perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's, obviously there's the informed delivery metrics that we're reporting on, your open rates and click rates and so forth. But on the digital side, where we're bringing records in, we're obviously showing how many people we matched, the impressions served, the reach, the frequency of impressions, and ultimately conversions. We're optimizing for conversions. We're placing a pixel on that thank you page, and while that campaign's running, we're bid adjusting for devices and domains and operating systems and so forth to really make sure we're getting the most conversions out of that budget. But we also have the ability to track other meaningful, what some call micro conversions on the site. So meaningful actions people take after being served an impression or after clicking on an ad, as well as, we have a sort of a unique setup where we're just even able to measure and extrapolate out, visits to the site that have come from the campaign as a result of, people not only receiving direct mail, but also seeing digital impressions. So it's really all the activity that is coming from a campaign can be seen to the metrics that we're providing in our digital reporting.
I'd just add to that it's because it all starts, or it's all rooted in the same target file, the same list of 100,000 or 500,000 or 1 million people, that anything Chris reports on online is part of an aggregate story of the total sales a campaign generates. So the measurement comes back to really a lot of what I was talking about, from directly attributable sales to fully matchback sales and where in between reality sits. We look at it through the lens of a full campaign. How much did we spend on this campaign, which includes the integration? And what did we get as a result in terms of sales and CPA for the entire campaign? Because we're of the opinion that in 2022, digital integration is an absolute fundamental element of direct mail today. Save a few random cases where they're trying to be official or discreet, or there's a list permission you can't get from a certain provider to execute on it. So it's really become synonymous with mail in our ecosystem here, and being at least somewhat on the front lines of the sales process here and talking to a lot of prospects, we're 80-90% plus in terms of adoption of it out of the chutes in first campaigns, because it's it makes so much sense to everybody that we would do this if we had the ability. And in the last 5 years, we've really uncovered some of the best practices, and there's been changes too out in the ecosystem that have made it more possible, more profitable. Data partners allowing it, seeing the value in it, platforms allowing it, the strength of these identity graphs becoming more reliable. There's been a lot that's kind of converged to make this the right time for this to be almost as much of a no-brainer as informed delivery, perhaps the biggest no-brainer there is.
Well, guys, wrapping up, we've talked a lot about where things are right now, all the amazing ways that technology has changed direct mail just in the last 10 years or so, 10, 15 years. What about the future of the direct mail industry as a whole? How do you see direct mail, direct response evolving?
Yeah, and Chris, feel free to add to this, but we've talked about this a lot as a senior leadership team here, right? We're looking at future planning and things like that and trying to stay a step ahead. And a lot of what we talked about today is honestly us preparing ourselves for what we believe the future of direct response to be. And that's a very prospect-centered, prospect-focused marketing strategy. One where the most important thing is developing this audience that we're all ultimately confident are the best people to hear about this product or service or hear from this client. And then the channel becomes less relevant. And it's not to say we're moving away from mail. We still fully believe mail to be not only an anchor, if not the anchor to a broader strategy. We just know that while a lot of these things are still relatively siloed within agencies and even within the clients, TV agencies, radio agencies, digital agencies, DM agencies, the delivery mechanism for all of these things is becoming increasingly online and increasingly programmatic. And so you've got a lot happening that suggests to us anyways, and our surround approach is kind of a step in that direction, that we're really going to move a little bit away from campaign to campaign and mail plus a little digital integration to a more holistic view of these are our prospects, which portion of them deserve the kitchen sink approach, mail, web video, display, connected TV, and audio and paid social, to maybe just mail plus some display, to maybe digital only. Maybe mail's a little too expensive. And beyond that, again, just more belief in the fact that, if we can't afford to send someone another mail piece in a 4-month stretch of time or a 6-month stretch of time, that doesn't mean we can't afford to send them some of these other advertisements. And so it moves a little bit away from campaign to campaign thinking and more about an evergreen strategy where there's a lot of channels at play. We're trying to stay in front of these people at all times, because at any point in time might be the right time. If we're ultimately confident these people are good prospects for this brand, then it comes down to just timing and being in the right place at the right time. So I don't know, Chris, if you got anything you'd add to that.
No, I mean, I think you covered. I just think it's obviously, Erik and I were talking about this before the call, and we're just inundated with advertising, all of us. And so it's what we really want to do is we want to achieve a level of resonance with prospects with our campaigns, where there's a situation where I think we've all experienced at one time or another when we see an ad that actually resonates with a need or desire that we have. And foundational to that is because someone's done it's not chance, it's because someone's done some very good work on the back end with data to put us into a targeting pool. They know something about us. And even in this environment that we're in now around increased privacy, we still in the direct mail world still have a lot of data to build powerful predictive models. And as Erik said, I think the winners are going to be people who are able to take that data, build the best models, and deliver effective advertising at the right place at the right time that gets people to respond.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, could not agree more. Well, that seems like a great place to stop for now. Thank you again, Erik Koenig and Chris Hofmann, for being here today. How can people find out more about SeQuel Response and get in touch with you regarding any of your services?
Yeah, well, thanks again, Paul, for having us. Common places, our website is SeQuel DM, SeQuel D as in direct, M as in mail, as you'd expect. So SeQuel DM, or D as in direct, M as in marketing. SeQuelDM.com. You'll find a lot of case studies, a lot of blog articles, some great content there that dive into a lot of what we talked about on a deeper level. And then you can find us on LinkedIn, on other social channels at SeQuel Response.
Great. Well, thanks again for being here today. I really appreciate it. And thank all of you out there for joining us today. And remember that you can join our conversation at any time by commenting below. Show your support by tapping the like button and click on subscribe to be notified of new videos when they're added to our channel. If you're interested in being featured in a future Meet the Mailers, I want to hear from you. My contact info can be found in the paragraph below by tapping Show More. Thanks again for watching Meet the Mailers, and see you next time.